What's going on, everybody? It is I, your best buddy Basil. All right, we're waiting for a few people to pop into the live stream here, but I think I'm mostly glad to be here. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good. I think it's better than having not been here, and I think the same about you guys, so thank you for being here. Starting the show a little bit late today. For those who caught yesterday's news talk, you probably heard a little something about my adventures in solar power. A little bit of a day yesterday, making sure that the power at the house would stay on, get on, stay on, because I'm off the grid, baby. There's no wires, no linemen to come out to help me. I am my own lineman, which is a bit of a project. So, but I am here now. We'll see how this one goes. There's a chance I might have to do it less than 3 hours. But, you know, it's late in the day anyways. Whenever we do these late shows, nobody wants us to go long. People got things to do. They got dinner to eat. They've got families. So that's what we're going to do here. I want to start by giving a big shout out to everybody who's on the Canary Cry text message alert system. And if you're not, get on it. Text the word canary to 877-740-3226. Do it now. Don't not do it. Do it. Text just the word canary to 877-740-3226, and you'll start receiving text message alerts when we go live, just a few times a week. But the fun part is people like texting that number back, and I like to read them. I'm going to read one now. This is from 903. Keep an ear out for your area code. So somebody from 903 texted and says, "Did you see the face?" I don't know what face this person is talking about. Apparently there's some sort of face to be seen. Maybe I'll have to jump on X. I'll jump on X and just search face. Then I will see all the hive mind's thoughts and conversations about face. All right, what else is next? 250 says, "God bless your time. Praying for you all." Thank you very much, Kat. 678 says, happy 3rd from North Georgia. Thank you very much, North Georgia. Sent a image of some blueberries. Appreciate that. And, oh, you know what? I want to give, what to do. Okay. What I think we should do is probably just start the show. Let's just go ahead and start the show here. So you know how it works. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to put on this. I'm going to click the button. And then we're off. Oh, no. Oh, jeez. Okay. All right. Hold on. Take this off. Got to find the jingle. Somebody's been moving all my jingles around again. I know where my jingles are. It might just seem like a big pile of jingles in the corner of the room. It might just seem like I organized my entire life through a series of doom piles that are placed all around the office. But they're my doom piles, and I know what's in them, so please don't touch the jingle pile. All right, I dug it out here. Let's do it.
Jesus' ministry as recorded in the four Gospels.
Oh my gosh. That was the Beyond the Verse video that we're going to watch in a second. Okay, here we go.
We got a caller on the line here.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Canary Cry Clubhouse, the opportunity here at the end of the week to take a deep breath, not dive into the news, not to search through history's doom piles to pull out the relevant paper clips and knickknacks that we need for the project at hand in order to piece together a cognizant, I don't know, view of history, reality, current events, things like that, to wade our way through the fifth generation warfare and the narratives that are flying at us from every direction. No, today we're going to be doing, well, some of that, but just in a different way. There's a place for fellowship, a place for exploration, and a place and a face for call-ins. I got a face for call-ins, folks. That's right. We're going to be premiering Gonz's new Beyond the Verse mini documentary. It's going to be great. How Jesus defeated the Nephilim, which I think, we complain about how, I say complain because I do mean it. We do complain. We should not be complaining, though. But that's how it is, being an old fogey. But we talk about how it's so weird, how even just mainstream, the biggest podcast in the world, the most popular content, we'll just casually talk about Nephilim now, but much how it can be a bit of a diversion. People getting into conspiracy theories, people learning the secret histories, people following current events and biblical prophecy, and diving into the esoteric messaging that is apparent and saturates all of the mainstream media, and how it crafts the way that we even experience the world around us. Just how that can be a bit of a diversion, a side quest. You can go miles and miles down a rabbit hole and find where you're questioning, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. How do I get out? And it seems like the fastest way out of the rabbit hole is to keep going through the rabbit hole all the way through the earth and come out in Australia or something. At least that's the hope, but you never come out. You never come out the other side of the rabbit hole. But you try to turn around and then you're stuck, you're tired. You're just kind of sitting there in the rabbit hole. A lot of people just get stuck there in the rabbit hole. They'll just kind of find a little chamber, cozy up a little bit, find out that it's actually quite comfortable in the rabbit hole, just living there. Living on grubs and water seeping through from underground aquifers, finding other weird mole people who are also stuck down in the rabbit hole, creating some sort of society of rabbit hole people who together decide that they will start a community and govern themselves in a new and efficient way. And then one rabbit hole person, they gather worms, they gather their grubs, they gather more than they could eat themselves, and they find the person who has, collected more seeping water from underneath the irrigation systems at Mar-a-Lago. And then they trade. And then capitalism is born. And then the rabbit hole people, the cycle goes on. Speaking of rabbit hole, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah, this show. Sometimes you got to come out of the rabbit hole, and that's what we're attempting to do on this show. Not to abandon the rabbit hole or the mission therein, but to simply talk about some other stuff. To meet, to call in, to fellowship a little bit, that sort of thing. So if you're watching live, you'll see in the description of this video, you'll see a call-in link. It's right there at the top. Don't ask me where it is, because it's right there in the description. It says call-in link. You click that, press a couple buttons, you follow it all the way through. You got to follow through. It'll put you into a back room where I will see you there, and when the time comes, I will invite you up on stage. We'll probably be taking callers after we watch the video. But if you're in the waiting room and you just don't want to wait for Beyond the Verse to play, you can send a little message in the private chat. I'll be able to see that and make the decision myself. All right, big ol' shout out once again to everybody who joined the Canary Cry text message alert system. Thank you for doing that. And if you haven't done it, you should really do it, because I don't know, folks. I don't know if we're safe online as far as a community and a show. One wrong word in the description, one wrong word in the title, and boom, we could disappear. We've done it now like 6 times before. We've disappeared and lost hundreds of thousands of listeners because of it, and I don't want you to be one of them. So if If you want to make sure to stay connected, get an alert when we go live, and you can also text me back at this number. Text the word canary to 877-740-3226. Even you, dear podcast listener, you don't have to be a live person to do this. Text the word canary to 877-740-3226. And you can send me a text back. I cannot text with you back and forth. It is too expensive for us to do that. But I see your messages. Sometimes I read them on the show. Kind of like 859, who texts and says, have a great show, Basil. Fixing my roof today. Pray it's okay. Lots of fixing to do. Lots of fixing to do. You probably heard hints of my solar panel electricity adventure yesterday, which kept me from News Talk. But I'm back now. Power's on, baby. Look at me go. Did it all by myself. 727 says, the verses are from King James, and grace unto you, both brothers. Thank you. I don't know what verses you're talking about, but I bet they're from King James. So thank you very much. This is annoying. I'll tell you this. I can't say it every time because it's just more jibber jabber. But when you text the number, I do not see our entire thread. It is not like looking at a phone where, you can scroll up and see everything you've ever said to a person, or regrettably not said to a person. I can only see the one message you send. So keep that in mind. If you're referencing an old message, very difficult for me to put that together. 830 says, love y'all. Prayers for God's protection on our family way across Texas tomorrow. Okay, praying for you. 4th of July. On our family's way across. You're driving across Texas on 4th of July. I guess there's no better day to do so. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, I'm taking a cold read at this, but the first few words looks interesting to me. This comes from 509. 509 says, hey, Basil, I was messaging with Dusty Slay, the comedian, about him not doing ads on his podcast, and we chatted about Mammon, modern advertising, writing as spells, Edward Bernays, Freud, etc., etc. Just wondering if you've created a video on the whole big picture of all this stuff and its relation to value for value. I know I've heard you break it down multiple times, but a video we can share would be cool. Bless you, man. Have a good one. God bless you, 509. I do want to do that. I know I must do that. And I will do that. I don't know exactly how or when, but it really needs to be done because I've repeated it over 800 times live on air, and everybody's exhausted hearing me say it. But just like you said, we need some sort of resource of research. So thank you. I will make an announcement, 509, when I do that. Okie dokie, so there you go. Text the word canary to 877-740-3226. Oh, we got one more. Let me say this. Incognito 907 says, update on snail mail. Due to USPS error, mail should be at your P.O. box as of today. Okay, thank you very much. Apparently, we're getting some mail from 907. We do have that P.O. box. We don't announce it very often. But if you go to canarycry.support, the website, canarycry.support, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see our snail mail address. It's a P.O. box, and you can send stuff there. There you go. All right. I will tell Gons to go to the P.O. box. Okay, so we are going to jump into the show here. I see we got some people lining up. Chicken. Okay. Lining up, and yeah, let's do this. Let's jump in. Let's dive into Gonza's mini documentary, Jesus defeating the Nephilim, how Jesus defeated the Nephilim, which is a beautiful, beautiful through line in the Bible, an interesting product of the integration of Genesis 6, or the Gen 6 paradigm, into the full biblical narrative, and thusly the full modern narrative as we understand the supernatural big picture of what exactly is going on around here. This documentary will be dropping on the Face Like the Sun channel. When? Saturday. Allegedly. It's supposed to be Saturdays. Sometimes, I don't know what happens, but it doesn't happen. It's not me. I don't do it, okay? Talk to Nancy at the office. All right, let's jump in here. Here is Beyond the Verse, how Jesus defeated the Nephilim.
Jesus' ministry, as recorded in the four Gospels, announced the good news of the kingdom of God. But what many modern readers often overlook is how deeply his mission was connected to the supernatural rebellion described in Genesis 6. Beginning with the 5th century, influential thinkers like Augustine shifted the church's view of Genesis 6 away from the angelic interpretation. Yet, Second Temple Jewish literature and the New Testament itself preserve strong echoes of that original understanding. In this episode of Beyond the Verse, we'll explore how Jesus came not only to redeem humanity, but to reverse the sin of the Watchers on his way to the cross and resurrection. Today's content is derived from the late Dr. Michael Heiser's book, Reversing Hermon, Enoch, the Watchers, and the Forgotten Mission of Jesus Christ. We start with Genesis 6, the original rebellion of the Watchers as recorded in the Bible. Genesis 6 verses 2 through 4 says, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." Second Temple Jewish literature, like First Enoch, describes these sons of God descending on Mount Hermon, corrupting humanity with forbidden unions and secret knowledge. Their offspring, the Nephilim, unleashed violence, idolatry, and demonic oppression. Their judgment will be imprisonment in the abyss until the final day. What's fascinating is that this passage shows that the Nephilim were still men, as they were called Geborim, or mighty men, who were of old, the men of renown. Yet these men were the result of an unholy union. There's a clear distinction made between the Bnei Ha-Elohim, or the sons of God here in Genesis, with the daughters of man, or Adam. And it's in these details where we see Jesus' genealogy reversing the corruption. Matthew 1:1 clearly states, "The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham." In this genealogy, Matthew includes Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, women whose stories involved seduction, deception, and scandal. But their outcomes were righteous, signaling that Jesus' very bloodline is a reversal of the Watchers' legacy, showing God's redemptive power over the most twisted circumstances produced by sin and its fallen agents. Then later in Matthew 17:2, it says, "And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light." It is now believed that this transfiguration event took place on Mount Hermon, the very site the sons of God, or otherwise known as the Watchers, descended onto earth. Jesus radiates his divine glory where fallen sons of God once defiled the earth, back in Genesis 6. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." According to 1 Enoch 15, demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. In other words, these unholy men that were created, that were subsequently wiped out with the flood of Noah, became disembodied spirits, or what the Bible records as demons. This makes every encounter of Jesus with demonic activity as particularly interesting, as it helps provide context as to where these demons came from and why Jesus is proclaiming authority over them. Back in the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 16, verse 18, it says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." It is well established that this famous passage took place at Caesarea Philippi, beneath Mount Hermon, known as, literally, the gates of Hades. Even this famous event has its direct ties to Genesis 6 and the problem with the Nephilim. Jesus directly challenges the underworld and proclaims his authority over them, something he continues to demonstrate throughout his ministry. The book of Enoch, chapter 8, records how the Watchers gave humanity corrupt knowledge like sorcery, war, astrology, even abortions. This premise is particularly fascinating when you zoom in on the character of Cain in the Old Testament in Genesis 4. As the first individual to commit murder in the post-fall world after the Garden of Eden, it is possible that Cain received special knowledge or favor from these Watchers. Why else would Cain build a city and name it after his son Enoch in Genesis 4:17? We see the birth of Cain in Genesis 4, verses 1 and 2, where Eve, interestingly, states, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." Then, of course, Cain's offering to God is rejected in favor of Abel. And then in verse 8, Cain murders Abel, creating the first blood sacrifice in the Bible. Then in verses 11 through 12, God declares Cain cursed. But could this curse from God be of favor for the fallen entities? Could this explain why Jesus rejected the temptation of Satan in Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus was taken to a very high mountain and showed all the kingdoms of the world and their glory? Satan was ready to hand over the keys to this kingdom that ultimately belongs to Jesus in the first place, if only he would bow down to Satan and worship him. It would logically follow that individuals who do fall into this trap and worship Satan may be asked to murder or shed blood in order to be favored with special knowledge and treatment by the accuser. Could this be the reason why Cain received special knowledge? Cain's lineage clearly shows technological pioneering. In verse 4:20, it states, "Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock." Then in verse 21, his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. And in verse 22, Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The presence of civilized dwelling, musical instruments, and metalworking definitely has its parallels to the commentary from Enoch, chapter 8. And this is where we can tie it back to Jesus' ministry. In John 8:32 it says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Jesus restores true wisdom and knowledge from the Father, and not from rebel angels. Through the use of parable, storytelling, and the performance of miracles, all documented in testimony with a clear narrative about the kingdom of God. As we move out of the Gospels and into the epistles, we see 1 Corinthians 11 verse 10 mention a peculiar detail. It says, "That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels." Here, Paul instructs women to cover their heads in worship, not just for modesty, but to uphold the created order. It has been suggested that this is again a recall to the Genesis 6 paradigm, where angelic beings were lured by human women. Paul's mention of it suggests a protective nature against the disorder that can be caused by this particular problem. And moving on, even in the central act of baptism is a narrative that directly connects it to a victory over the fallen Watchers. In 1 Peter 3 verse 19, Jesus proclaims his triumph to the imprisoned Watchers after his death, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. Thus, baptism actually becomes a powerful symbol, a reminder to all the disembodied spirits, principalities, and powers, the formerly embodied Nephilim, what their fate was in judgment during the days of Noah. Thus, every baptism from Jesus onward has been an ongoing proclamation of Jesus' victory over the fallen Watchers and its offspring. So, from Genesis to Revelation, from Mount Hermon to the Mount of Olives, Jesus reversed the rebellion, reclaimed the world, and crushed the ancient powers that sought to destroy it. And it is this narrative that will become ever more important for the church to understand as we go deeper and deeper into the age of genetic editing, synthetic biology, and the potential disasters at hand because of these technological developments.
Well, there you go, folks. I don't know what could I possibly add to that. It's right there. I mean, it's so interesting. As I mention almost every single show, I grew up in the church, was born in the church, never not been a Christian person, although famously have spent my dalliances exploring all the different types of Christianity that is out there, and it is a wide swath with varying degrees of recognizable orthodoxy. And so, growing up and trying to be a good kid or just trying to understand the world and being in the Christian community and in churches everywhere I went is very interesting because it can feel a little bit isolating because every person that you meet outside of the church, if they find out you're a believer, that you go to church or these types of things, it's sort of instantly, you can almost feel it, instantly causes some sort of disconnection. I'm not saying it's, a big deal every time, but it is rarely something, at least back in my day, that you find out you have in common with a new person. And so it's easy to sort of naturally have that part of you be a little, not that part of you, but that information to be a little bit compartmentalized, because someone who may be outside of the Christian community or maybe even just the religious community as a whole, when they talk about, quote, being religious or something like that, it's sort of something separate from history, separate from daily life, separate from, it's like you're living your life, going to work, going to school, doing your thing, and that's kind of the main event. And then the optics, I think, for a lot of people is that for, quote, religious people, they have kind of this little side quest that happens. And, Jesus' death and resurrection, it kind of takes care of the sin stuff. And, they've got, they being Christians, you've got this whole other book that you have all these stories from. And each story seems to be another little, what's the word? Parable. There's a lesson. There's a moral lesson in each individual little Bible story. Okay, you're in this kind of problem, you tell this Bible story. You got this kind of problem, you got this Bible story. It kind of comes across. That's at least the impression that I often got, was that people who were not believers or did not have any experience, any context with Christianity specifically, saw the Bible as sort of a collection of old stories that you can reference for different moral situations in your life. Almost like a little handbook, like you'd reference a textbook or a reference book or instructional guide or a manual to some sort of product where you jump in there when you need it and you jump on out. But here's the thing about manuals to products is there's a cohesive through line in that manual. Okay, you might not always jump in and read it from start to finish. You find the part you need, but if you were to read a manual all the way through, and it doesn't have to be a manual, it could be a textbook, could be a history book, something. You can go in and reference little bits of it, but when you read it all the way through, there is a through line. In a manual, the through line is here is the product and here is everything about the product. If it's a history textbook, it'll be, here is the historical through line for these periods of time. And in the same way, I don't think it's appreciated by a lot of secular folks, and also not appreciated by a lot of Christian folks. The fact that the Bible has this very direct through line. Now, of course, it has a lot. It has many. It's also a self-written history of the ancient Hebrew people. Okay, you might consider it that way. And then if you're Christian, you've got the self-written history of the, at the time, still Hebrew people, but finding a new relationship with God. And it's done pretty much chronologically. But there's also a through line that starts in Genesis 6 and appears and is relevant to everything else from there until the end. And what's even crazier is the through line from Cain. I mean, you've got Genesis 6, but you've got Cain killed Abel. Cain went out to basically invent society. And with that, the line of Cain came technology, came pretty much every tool or system or technology that made human beings what they are today. You've got this very interesting, as happens many times in the Bible, you've got this interesting fork in the road for humanity. And they usually are related to one another. They're usually brothers. There's lots of forks in the road of humanity that comes from the choices of two different brothers. And Cain and Abel is one of them. Cain committing a sort of sacrifice out of jealousy, out of rebellion, out of all sorts of things. Some of the nastier human emotions and motivations. Spills the blood of Abel, who Abel was very pleasing in the eyes of God, was a little bit more in the, I would say, lifestyle lineage of their parents, walking with God, having a close relationship with God. And then Cain not only kills his brother for a reason that is not actually very explicit, but as a human person with feelings, you can certainly come up with a few reasons why that might have been the case. Then he goes off into the wilderness east of Eden and basically creates human society. And so you have technology hand in hand as a result of a separation from not only God, but from humans who are pleasing to God. So right from the beginning, first book, you're talking about basically an anti-God technocracy. And then it just spirals out from there. And if there is not a better moment in history that reflects this moment that we read in Genesis, I don't know what it could possibly be. And so wrapped up in all of this, I mean, again, remember, technology, systems, things like this, also brought by the Watchers. Now you've got Elohims, little e, Elohim. You've got spiritual beings participating in this technocratic rebellion from God, giving, I mean, one is forced to speculate, giving human beings, pressing the fast forward button on human development. Technology happens this way. It's very strange. Now, we're surrounded with it, so we might not really feel its impact, but that's the thing with humans. They will just sit with the same technology for 1,000 years and nothing will change. And then in the span of like 100 years, technology will increase in such a way that it almost seems unnatural. And perhaps it is unnatural. Perhaps it is supernatural. I mean, won't even get into the endless theories about why humanity, since, the Roswell crash, has basically experienced 30,000 years of technological improvement in 50, 70 years. I guess 75 now, math kids. And this is, at least from the human perspective, the story of humanity. You could almost, in a way, in one telling of the entire human history, you could say, we were naked, and then we just do a whole bunch of technology, and that's when we're here. History is almost, you could almost recite history entirely in the language of technological development. In fact, we do. It's called the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, these types of things. We categorize vast swaths of human history based on the technology that existed at the moment, the Stone Age. And now we're obviously on the precipice, if not sort of free-falling into whatever age this is. I suppose the information age was one of the more recent ones, and now we're going into something. And to lose sight of the importance, the supernatural sort of cosmic importance of measuring human history based on technology and these moments where supernatural beings kind of fiddle with the technological situation with humanity, you're missing such an important explanatory venue for who we are, what we're doing here, and what's to come. Now, for me, I grew up in a American Protestant, not quite evangelical, but you could technically call it an evangelical, a little bit more charismatic upbringing, in which studying Revelation was always a favorite pastime. It might not be the Sunday morning sermon, but it certainly was the Wednesday night sermon. It certainly was the Thursday, it's just what's happened a lot, okay? And it has always, 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 in my 30-something years of being a Christian, Revelation is understood, much of it, in the context of technology. Because there's so many things in there that would require, you kind of have a couple of options. One option is you take a sort of hyper-literal reading of the book of Revelation, and there's an actual dragon, there's an actual beast, there's an actual, bear, there's an actual, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Or you can take it, which I think is the more, I was going to say reasonable. I don't think reasonable is the word I'm looking for, but, it's the more scholarly, it's maybe the more thoughtful way to understand much of the book of Revelation is that, John is like in prison on the Isle of Patmos, kind of doesn't have a whole lot of input except for what is brought to him supernaturally, and what he's seeing in his visions, is somebody in the in an ancient Hebrew prison trying to understand what's being shown to him. Not that I necessarily think that when he saw locusts coming up from the abyss, that he actually saw helicopters and just called it locusts. I don't know. The Lord speaks in all sorts of images and ways. But beside the point, it was always done in the context of technology. Mark of the Beast. First it was a barcode, then it was an RFID chip, and now it looks like it might be some sort of genomic tampering or something. I mentioned the locusts, of course. It used to be helicopters. Oh, there's going to be a bunch of helicopters. Now we know, we have better technological perspective. Could just be drones, little tiny drones or something. The whole end game, at least as far as I was brought up to understand it, revolves around a drastic improvement in the technology of human beings, just like it did with Cain. And so that's why it feels so relevant right now. And that's why, when we started podcasting 2012 or so, we're talking about data centers. We were just telling people who had never heard before that Facebook was spying on them. There's this transitionary period in technology where talking about Facebook spying on you was just as crazy as like talking about Bigfoot. Like, can you imagine? Do you remember 2012 if you were somebody who was kind of in this genre in 2012? Could think back, and people who are maybe newer to this, maybe it came around during COVID or something like that. It's cool. Happy you're here. Try to imagine a podcast that would talk about how Facebook can see everything you're doing, and then talking about Bigfoot being an interdimensional supernatural being. And those two subjects existed on the same podcast. And here we go. It's only been 10, 13 years. And the technology part of it has so vastly outpaced what you'd expect for 10 years of technological development. It's almost like another one of these epochs, another era, another moment, another Cain being given not just crazy ideas, but given the skills or given the inspiration by whoever to launch us into whatever next age. And I think, we're seeing Christianity become so much more widespread, not just Christianity, but what used to be called fringe Christianity, talking about Nephilim, talking about the supernatural. I think it's the perfect response. And now we've got our own Tubal Cains. They might be called Elon Musk's or something like that. And it doesn't just have to be a billionaire, but these men who come in and somehow have the ability to bring humanity so far forward technologically that it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like there's some other entity helping us out. And the fact that that is an integral part, technology, and this whole thing I just rambled on about, has such an integrated importance with Genesis 6, the Nephilim, and Jesus Christ, the Logos of the universe. It makes the idea that, quote unquote, religious people, that religion is some sort of compartmentalized piece of their lives. It's human history. In the Bible, you're not just looking at past human history, but you're seeing right now history that was written so long ago. So I am encouraged that this sort of integrated understanding of what was previously considered fringe conspiracy theory crazy people doing podcasts on the internet talking about simultaneously Nephilim, data centers, Facebook, the Watchers, and Jesus. It still trips me out. I've said it before, but if you haven't heard me say it, if there is some sort of simulation thing going on, it is really weirding me out that it that the Lord put Gons and I in the position that we are, where it just feels like the simulation is just like plugged right into the podcast. Okay, well, with that, going to open up to some callers here in a moment. Just a reminder, if anybody's out there, in the description of this video, you got a little link there, says call in link. You can click on that, tap, tap, tap. You'll get put in the waiting room. Just a reminder to any future and current callers, I will be running a 10-minute timer just to help us stay on track. I think, I'm not actually positive, but I think the callers are able to see the timer that I have there in the back room. But if not, no worries. And remember, you can talk about whatever you want. If it's related, if it's unrelated, doesn't matter. We're just here to let the Holy Spirit do his thing. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to bring up the first caller. This first caller is Lincoln, and I'm going to bring you on stage, Lincoln. Here we go, buddy. What's going on? How are you?
Hey.
Thanks for calling in.
Good.
How you doing?
Hanging in there, man. It's been a year.
It's been a year. Yeah, I hear you. So what's on your mind today?
I was remembering that last call that Psalm 40 made that I heard where he brought up the song Dirty Old Town.
Okay.
Remember that? From
the
Pogues?
From the what?
The Pogues.
Oh, yes.
Dirty Old Town. And that's exactly the lineage of Cain, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder genetically if there's any connection between Nephilim and Neanderthal.
They do kind of seem like they would have a lot in common, don't they?
It's a question. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Most of all, I just want to make sure that everybody that hears this understands that God, this great conductor for this orchestra that we'll never understand, but we're all his instruments that he's calling to be played for his glory, sent his only son, his firstborn, right? And offered him, his only born, offered him for the payment of our wretchedness. And that was Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And our belief in him and what he did will move more than mountains. He also said it will uproot the fig tree that came from the sea and put it in salt water, right? The sea is salt, and it will grow there and produce fruit.
Amen.
And the trajectory God has me on in my life is that looks so much like aquaponics. And I want rich people that have enough, that have been blessed by the crypto or crazy whatever system, to buy into either me or anybody else. Steal this idea. Go do this for people. Build food production systems in people's backyards and let them also pay for a similar sized system to help to feed an orphanage, a homeless shelter, or a retirement community.
Yeah, man. Yeah, are you a hydroponics guy? Have you played around with that?
I became a master electrician in order to help see God's will done.
Amen. See, there you go. Mastering the technology, man. I am by no means a master electrician. I don't know if you heard yesterday, I wasn't able to be on News Talk because the power went out at the house. So I spent all day zapping myself with solar systems and updating firmware and doing all that sort of thing. And there's moments like that where I think, it would sure be nice to be a master electrician right now. I'd have to watch way less YouTube videos to get the lights back on. But on that note, I do know some folks who are off grid like myself, who I think have done some things like you're talking about. Like they have a big trailer, they have like a semi trailer that they got all hooked up and do aquaponics in there. I don't know what they're growing in there, but I'm assuming it's food for an orphanage.
Tomato,
Okay.
potatoes. You know, you can grow potatoes in a even waterless. I mean, they're not dipped, right? They get sprayed. It's
Uh
aerosol.
huh.
They get
Oh,
sprayed with water, and they dangle in midair, no soil. And
that's crazy.
supposedly the numbers are you can get 3 times as much yield using 90% less water if you recirculate.
That's crazy. I
And
mean, that's
the fish are crucial,
yeah.
right?
The fish, like it's a nutrient thing, huh?
Because it's not just the fish; it's the bacteria that break down the fish waste. It's God's design that we'll never fully understand, but we have to integrate with, right? It's
Yeah.
and I don't know. But Jesus
No.
Christ, obviously, right? Why would you want to feed people or
Yeah.
care about people, right?
Eh,
Because people need to live fully to help others, right?
yeah. Amen, man. I mean, come on. What are we even doing here?
God help us.
Yeah. Amen, man. Well, thanks for calling in. I love that. I got to look into that potato thing. Somebody was telling me I could grow potatoes pretty easy, just like in a barrel in the garage. And in fact, I actually had a guy, I had a buddy he was building a garage, and he had a bunch of dirt that he needed to get rid of, and he was gonna like take it to the dump, which I did not know you could take dirt to the dump and pay to throw it away. It seems, I
But
don't know, it
waste.
doesn't seem right. So I had him come and drop it off on the property, and I was like, I'm gonna use all this dirt to grow some potatoes. And then, of course, I never did that. But it sounds like growing potatoes dangling with a nutrient mister sounds, I don't know if easier, but
Well,
probably cooler.
the structure costs more, but the long term, like to me, the goal is always off grid, just like you are, right? So that when the system crashes, somebody could still feed their neighbors.
Yeah, amen, man. And I'll say this, my neighbor hit me up. I say my neighbor, but they're quite far away. And they said, "Oh, do you need any radishes?" And I go, "I don't know, not really." They say, "Oh, I've got too many radishes." Apparently, he just planted radishes, and he doesn't have anything else. And I'm like, this seems like the beginning of some sort of apocalypse farmer's market. All I got to do is grow some potatoes, and we can get a nice radish and potato based economy going.
Polyculture.
Polyculture, is that the word for it?
You need all the plants, right? And they
Oh,
have
right.
at their specific time. If you do closed environment agriculture, greenhouses, right? You control the temperature. You can do lettuce and tomatoes year round, where you harvest a head of lettuce and some tomatoes every day of the year.
Sounds like a lot of work, man, but somebody's got to do it.
Got the money for it. That's God will provide when in His time.
If if you had to guess, or maybe you don't need to guess, maybe you figured it out. Uh, how much money would it take to do like a, I don't know, an operation, like an operation that one person could do at their property or whatever in a trailer or something?
One would probably cost $80,000 minimum.
Okay. I mean, that could be worse. Is this a like a
Yeah,
building, or is this a trailer? Like, what does that look like?
custom designable. You could put it in a bunker underground. You could put it in a tree house. Whatever you want to do. Like you could. Uh, I had this idea a couple years ago. I just saw a post about it. They're pumping water upstream and harvesting it, the energy from it on the way back down. I like you could do that with buckets, and they have these little. They're pretty cool. Inline plumbing generators. So a half inch, 3/4, 1 inch line. you can generate power 12 volt, 5 volt off the falling water.
Right. Sick.
Do it.
Well, all right. Well, there you go. 80 grand, Lord. That's all it takes.
I mean, my goal really is the $3 million customer that wants to put up 6 so we can build the same thing at a homeless shelter.
Yeah. It
That's
seems like
money out there.
yeah, for sure. Well, all right, dude. You've got big vision, you've got motivation, you've got God on your side. I believe that Lord's will be done. Somebody will come in, they need their radish factory, and the community and the orphanage and the homeless shelter, and everybody can benefit off that forever and ever, brother.
Family traveling tomorrow. That was me, 830. Across Texas for work. My dad bought a house. We're remodeling it. My whole 5 kids are coming with me, and the wife. So,
woo,
caravan up there tomorrow, and just y'all's prayers for protection and safe travels. Thank you.
Yeah, amen, brother. Okay, that's a big 4th of July trip there. So, yeah, everybody out, pray-ducers around the world, we're praying for Lincoln and the whole family for goodness, some patience. Patience for driving across Texas, but of course, safety and a good time, buddy.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless. Talk to you later. There's a man with big ideas, folks. That was always, I think there's something about millennials in general. I think it's just kind of the way we were raised. I think maybe it was a little bit of because it was so counterculture, I think it's sort of installed in a lot of millennials as a whole. Not that there's no boomers, not that there's no Gen Z, not that there's anybody else who's not interested in going off grid, but doing the off grid, farmer thing. There's something deep inside of every single millennial that knows that that is what they must do and that is what they will do. And big ideas come along with that. So I encourage anybody who has that desire deep down in their soul, just make it happen. If I could do it, you could do it. That's all I got to say. I don't think I should need to say anything more than that. And if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. If I can do it, literally, which is a new word I just invented, literally, everybody can do it. All right, we got another caller sitting here in the back room. Remember, folks, call-in links down there in the description. Just click that. Come on in. You don't need to talk about anything specific. We could talk about radishes and potatoes for all I care. This is a moment for Canarians to get outside the cage a little bit. All right, starting the next timer here in a moment, 10 minutes, we've got another caller. Esteban is back on the line. I'm going to bring you up, Esteban. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Basil?
Hanging in there, man.
I just wanted to just to piggyback off the previous caller. I've heard some folks, individuals and groups of folks have started buying abandoned schools, like in small rural towns and communities, like an abandoned school, elementary school, if you will.
Mhm.
And they fix it up and they kind of use it for storage, just to store things there should, grids go down and whatnot. I've been hearing things like that, yeah, where, some people have bought the whole property or several individuals have bought the whole property and, they kind of share the space and, like I said, just kind of use it for storage or a base of operation. Lord forbid, should any type of need for it arise.
Yeah, stuff hit the fan for sure, which
Right,
more and
that's
more people
essentially,
are coming to that conclusion there.
Yeah,
A
should it
school.
Yeah, abandoned school that they're not using anymore, but probably
Sure.
just don't want to tear down or what have you.
Yeah, you could probably get something like that for cheaper than you'd expect.
Yeah. So that's what I've been hearing. Um, what I wanted to talk about, um, and unfortunately, it's going to take longer than 10 minutes, but I understand the timer. But with everything what's been going on between Israel and Iran, and you know, um, I'm seeing a lot of folks just kind of, and I get it. Nobody wants war except evil people, and regardless of whose side you take in this whole conflict, um, it's just getting really nasty. But I'm starting to see a lot of so-called believers, uh, what I call practice replacement theology, if you will.
Yeah, I think we
And
talked about this a few episodes ago with together.
yeah, it's just I mean, but it's getting more and more prominent, and we don't have to talk about what it is. We don't have to uh, ride that horse again. But what I will say is, when the Lord talks about the great falling away, I don't believe it's just, or let me rephrase it. I think that's also part of the deception, if you will, along because I think replacement theology is also false doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about believing an antichrist and all of that, but believing something that's patently false, that's not in the Bible. I think is also a part of the great falling away and believing a false doctrine or a doctrine of demons, if you will. And it's becoming more and more prominent. And I think that's going to be a really going to be a real big issue, because it's funny. Replacement theology people, man, they love going around saying, Jesus Christ died for my sin, but it was the Jews who crucified him. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
don't know if
It's
I hear that a whole lot. I don't know. See, here's the interesting thing. Just a couple comments so far. Um, I don't know if I see replacement theology being more popular than it's been because, at least in my experience growing up in the church, replacement theology was actually kind of like the evangelical standard. Like, that was just, when I was younger, that was just kind of, the sort of basic theology that was pretty common across evangelical churches that I would go
it
to
was.
or
I
or
agree.
know people. And so I don't know if I think the conversation is more happening more often. I mean, that's what we noticed as well with this particular Israel-Iran conflict, which is very interesting. There's something now. Of course, I think there's some sort of op going on, but
Hmm.
Israel has had conflicts every year for my entire life, and never until this year had I seen the conversation about replacement theology or dispensationalism like literally be played on mainstream news organizations. And like,
Yes,
so it's
yes.
coming. I don't know if
But
more
why
or
is that?
less people
Why
believe
is
it.
that?
Well, because it's in the national interest, according to the establishment, to jump into, well, to do whatever is needed to maintain our relationship with Israel. So that's and that's counter to what the mainstream wants. You got the mainstream where they want to do everything they can to keep the American preference for the safety of Israel above, at least other certain desires of people. And replacement theology, it's usually being uh, reported, at least in the mainstream, like Daily Beast. We read that Daily Beast article and stuff. Is being reported as this is why Christians are bad because they have replacement theology and they think which is very, again, very strange coming from the mainstream. Christians are bad because they don't think that Israel, the nation state of Israel, is the same as Israel in the Bible, something like
Well,
that.
here's what I'll say, and yes, I get it. Schofield, Darby, the dispensationalism is rather new, only in the 1800s, and I understand all of that, and all of that is technically true, but it's like still, it's just it just seems like in some cases we're just kind of trying to erase an entire people group, or at the very least, you know, um,
I'm sorry.
like
Replace an entire people group?
erase.
E- Erase. Who are?
Yeah.
Sorry. The Israel. Is that what you're saying? Erase Israel?
Yes. Yes. When it
Huh.
comes to promises of the Lord, is basically what I'm saying.
Uh huh. Okay.
And so, I just think it's just rather interesting. Um, it
So
just I'm like,
someone, I could see someone out there listening and thinking, "Oh, this guy supports going to war with Iran on behalf of Israel."
absolutely not. I will say this, and I don't know if you know this, and I'm sure a lot of believers, Christians in America or the West don't know this, but Iran has a large Christian population as well.
Mm-hmm.
They are persecuted, and a lot of it's an underground church, but they do have a viable underground, thriving Christian community and Christian church. And of course, they're being persecuted. And I will admit, I wouldn't mind seeing a regime change so that our brothers and sisters in the Lord are no longer persecuted. It wouldn't I'm not going to sit here and say that would not make me happy. It absolutely would.
Yeah.
However, I also know that persecution will happen, and it comes with being a follower of Christ.
You
And
know,
so,
it's interesting. This is now the third call you've made about this topic, and I think I'm just maybe now understanding why it's an interesting conversation, because you are saying, here's what I'll say: you come in saying replacement theology isn't true. And so the nation state of Israel is Israel from the Bible. Now, usually, when people are making that point, the only reason they even have that conversation is to justify joining in Israel's war with Iran in this case,
or
other places.
so people who believe in replacement theology think.
Well, so that's where I'm getting, which is you seem to simply be focused on the ideas of replacement theology, like totally separate from the subject of war with Iran. Is that like you're
Because they are, yes,
not
yeah,
even like connecting it? And so I think it's very
because they are
difficult
separate.
for,
They are
well,
separate.
right. So what I'm saying is I can understand having this conversation that you're having right now about replacement theology. If you would be having this conversation like literally at any other time in recent history, it wouldn't be like such a triggering conversation. It's the
Yes,
fact that you're doing it right now where the mainstream conversation, and even you said yourself, everybody's doing replacement theology. Well, the only reason anybody's talking about it right now is because of the context with Iran. So
exactly.
you're trying to come in and have this conversation, but try to not have it in the context of Iran. What would be the inspiration for that?
Well, because again, well, you're right, but again, like I said, the, the context of Iran, whether we like it or we want to admit it or not, is also somewhat biblical in the sense that you know the world, the enemy, is going to try and destroy the church and destroy Israel. That's just a fact. The Lord was clear about that. So this little, I guess, skirmish or dust up with Iran is just a small taste of things to come. And like I said, for me, it's about the deception of it, because I think because of this whole thing with Iran and Americans in particular being sick of war, which I am as well, I think they're letting that blind them, or I guess the fear of globalism, which I don't like globalism either, and all of that. They're saying we have to automatically be against them so that we don't get caught up. They think by being against Israel, that's
So
going against. Hold on, please. Let me make this point. They think they think not wanting to necessarily support Israel, not necessarily fight for them, but support them, will be going against the beast system and going against globalism and going against the Antichrist, when in fact it's actually playing right into his hands.
yeah, I'm having a little bit of a tough time holding on to the sort of train of logic, but I think I got it. I think I have it. But I think it would be unfair to not push against some of the generalizations that you're making with replacement theology people, where the insinuation that if someone believes in replacement theology that they are then anti-Israel, which I really, I mean, you can, maybe you can see that on like X or something, or maybe there's like some podcasters, but most of the people, I mean, all of the people that I know personally who, aren't under the impression that the current nation state of Israel is equivalent to the promises to Israel in the Bible, none of them hate Israel or don't like Jews or something. They just don't like the Bible being used, the promises to biblical Israel being used to justify getting into war.
And I'm going to push back against that, because, and the reason why I am is because they think people saying, "Hey, hold up, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater," then we must be shills for Israel and the Zionists, which I get. AIPAC runs our Capitol Hill, and all of that is true, and the banks and all of that is true. That is true. So for them, it's all of the other ancillary stuff. They destroy the USS Liberty, which is true. All of that is true. But they're using all of that to say that we have to totally be against them. Because put it this way, when I mean against them, I mean it against them and maybe against is a bad word, but again, it didn't start with the gas chambers 85 years ago either. It started with just little subtleties. And I'm not saying that replacement theology, that's what they're advocating. But what I'm saying is this is what I'm saying. I think it's actually playing into the hands of the New World Order, Antichrist, beast system, saying that, well, we've replaced them and that they no longer matter because they denied Christ, they crucified Christ. And it's like every people group has denied Christ.
So
Every people.
Do you have an X account? Are you on X or
I do not
social
know.
media? Okay. Because I will say this, and I'll say this honestly, and I hope you hear me the right way. The sort of dichotomy that I'm hearing you lay out feels like very much of an X vibe, like a Twitter vibe, where it's this like very sort of extreme set of dialectics that do sort of end with kind of extreme references. Like when you start referencing gas chambers, and you start when it goes, I forget what it's like. There's a name for the thing where once you start bringing up the Holocaust, like you've extended the logic so far past what's probably the practical issue at hand that it kind of just takes the form of theory rather than
I'm
whatever.
I'm saying that because the reason why I'm saying that is because everything starts, everything has a genesis point, is all I'm saying. And
Yeah.
so whether we've reached that point or not, and I don't believe we have, I'm not saying I'm just saying that's how other events concerning them has happened, just by small innocuous, well, why are we doing this, or whatever the case may be. That's all I'm saying. So I understand why you think it's an X thing, but
Well,
it
it's just there's kind of a lot of straw manning, I guess, is what I'm saying. Because I'm telling you, I know a lot of people who probably don't think that much about it, but were brought up and are generally in a sort of theological atmosphere that the promises of Israel include, the grafted on Christians in the New
yes,
Testament.
yes.
So they don't really think really about Israel a lot at all. And, I think that's going to be the majority of the replacement theology people. And replacement, I think, is even a little bit of a diabolical term to use. Dispensationalism's another one. But I don't think most people who are replacement theology people are, take it so far as to like hating Jews or
I never,
wanting Israel.
no. I
Well,
never
you
said
said it.
that. No, I
You
didn't.
said it a couple times.
No, I didn't say that they hate him. I never said that they hate him. I'm saying that,
Well, you brought it back to the gas chambers.
but
I mean, that's
I use that reference point because I'm saying it didn't start with that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what replacement theology people want. I'm just saying, I'm saying that even the worst case scenario or the worst possible outcome didn't start out at that. It started out as something innocuous and harmless. And I'm not saying it's necessarily going to go the same route. I'm just saying
so. Is
that
your real quick, just so I understand? So are you saying that replacement theology is leading to what, hatred or more gas chambers or like
I'm saying I do believe that it could potentially lead to um, how do I want to make sure I put it so I don't get accused of straw manning. I'm saying I think it's at least part of the deception. Because if you're going to believe something that's clearly anti-biblical, then what? I mean, if you're going to believe something that's anti-biblical, then who's to say that you wouldn't want something like that? I
well,
mean,
I mean,
if
I don't
you're
know
either
about
with,
that.
hold on, no, I'm sorry, you're either with Christ or you're not. You're either his child or you're his enemy. And we
Mm-hmm.
know in the latter days, regardless of what your belief of that is, that they will try. I'm not saying, obviously, well, I am saying they won't succeed because the Bible says they won't, but they will try. And the lengths that they will go to will just be enormous. So it's not a stretch to
Who's they?
use
Are you
that
saying
reference.
they replacement theology
No,
people?
I'm talking about the enemy. I'm talking about the enemy, people
Uh-huh.
and people
Yeah.
under the sway of the enemy is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, we all want to make
I,
sure we got good
I don't
theology.
know.
I'm not
I'm
a I don't have the apologetic skills to make the case for replacement theology people, and I would not want to embarrass anybody who does have those apologetic skills to do so. I will say it sounds, I mean, I think it is an important conversation. I think you correctly discern that it is a major issue. I think the powers that be
I
obviously
think it will be a major issue.
discern
I
that
think it
as
will be.
well, which is why, narrative operations in the mainstream get geared towards that same thing. I think there's a risk of falling victim to the sort of mainstream psyop narrative, operation when taking language like, language that questions the salvation of Christians who might, have grown up with replacement theology. I think there's a risk falling into that, narrative psyop where not only are you questioning salvation, but questioning intentions and taking things all the way out to their logical sort of apocalyptic conclusions. You may very well be right that there is an aspect of the Great Deception that includes this conversation. And I think you're very obviously right, because it is obvious that the mainstream wants to stoke these conversations. But I think it might be a good opportunity to talk about it with people in a way that doesn't sort of inherently question their motives, doesn't inherently question their salvation, doesn't, this kind of stuff. And it
Oh,
seems like it's, this is a conversation that you feel very called to. So I would give the recommendation as your buddy, I'd give you the some that there's probably some ways to talk about it that doesn't make replacement theology people jump directly to thinking you're calling them Nazis or something like that. And I
okay,
think that
and
you'll
that's a
do a
fair
great job
point.
of finding that way of talking about it.
That is a fair point. But could I also say that um, whether you and again, I don't want to be fighting their war, but again, not fighting their war and not wanting them to be annihilated or wiped out is also not being the shill. In other words, those extremes go the other way too. If you don't
Yeah,
want
sure.
them to, if you want them to be able to defend themselves, even if we help them out, for God's sakes, we give money to Pakistan. So why are people complaining that we give money to Israel? So that name calling in those extremes go the other way go the other way too. Oh, you're a puppet. You're a Zionist puppet. You're a shill. That goes the
Mm-hmm.
other way too, Basil. So,
Yeah.
and second of all, again, not question. I never question anyone's, salvation or anything.
Well,
I'm just,
you
I'm
called
just
them
saying.
so-called believers.
Well, okay. Well, then maybe I apologize for that. But be that as it may, I'm just saying it it
Mm-hmm.
it it could be a part of what I believe what Christ talked about is the great deception. But again, as I
Yeah.
just said, the name calling in the extremes go the other way as well.
Yeah.
Again,
And
if
I'll
you
say
if you
this,
want to if you want to give them some missiles to defend themselves, you're a shill for the Zionists, and it's just like, come on, dude.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it could go both ways, obviously. Now, you and I are really only responsible for the behavior of you and I. We can't, group in angry people on the internet with, whatever ideology we're speaking against or speaking, I guess, conversing about, dialoguing about. But as far as how we can move forward having these kinds of conversations, I think that we can only take responsibility for that. Now, we will always, especially, and this is, I think, where we agree, especially when it's quite obvious that the mainstream narrative magicians who are controlling the minds and the hearts of billions of people all at once by making sure certain conversations are being stoked on a regular basis, 24/7. When we enter that ring that has been built by the powers that be to have the conversation that we're having now, the only reason we're having it now is because there has been a cage match, an octagon, a fighting ring that has been constructed by, the media, the governments, these types of people. It's the only reason why we're having this conversation right now. And so as we move forward and, we try to navigate this very dangerous fifth generation sort of warfare battlefield, we can step into the ring, but let's make sure that we're very cognizant of the fact that when we step into a ring that's labeled, replacement theology, we have to remember and have to include and have to have grace for people on the other side, because to even have the conversation right now is part of the fifth generation warfare regarding Israel and Iran. It doesn't matter if you want to talk about it in that context. It doesn't matter if you cared about it beforehand. It doesn't matter, if we're having the conversation now, it's because of Israel and Iran. So knowing that, we can equip ourselves to be ready. You want to be ready for each battlefield. Each battlefield is different. You
Okay,
wear
so let
different
me ask you
armor,
a question.
different weapons for different
Yeah,
situations. And
I
I think
understand
it's
all
just
that.
good to keep in mind and remember that if you're jumping in and start questioning people's, Christianity, and trying to, and getting upset when they assume that you're having the conversation that the mainstream is forcing on everybody, I think that will give you an agility in these conversations that will really profit the way that you are able to,
Okay, so can
win
I
the
ask you a
battle.
question? What would you call it? I'm just curious. What would you call it? Because you've explained a lot. So I'm just, what would you call these conversations, and how would you go about it? Because either way, I don't know if you're able to. And it's not that I disagree with you, but somebody's going to get into their feelings one way or the other, and so I'm just kind of,
What do you mean call it? Call the
how would
conversation?
you um how would you, because I'm trying to figure out how you would go about it, because you seem to be more knowledgeable about it than I on trying to have those conversations. So if there's something I'm missing,
Well, just as a strategy, I'd say walk into a conversation with somebody like you want to bring a friend. You want to have a friend coming out the other side, again, and it's just coming back to extending somebody's argument out to the Holocaust, or, deriving their ideas from, well, the Holocaust, or things like this, questioning saying someone's a so-called believer is a great way to immediately trigger a lifetime of defensiveness of, it's hard enough to be a Christian in society, and it only makes it worse when Christians start questioning each other's salvation. So I'd say avoid those things and come into it thinking you're trying to, you want to walk out skipping and holding hands with the person. It isn't defeating them on the battlefield, leaving them bloodied and surrendered to your ideas, because that's how the world wants it to be. That's how the mainstream wants it to be. That's how the fifth generation warfare people want it to be. They want you to go into battle rhetorically and defeat and slay the other person. But, Christ and his upside down kingdom, and the way that we're to love our enemies, and the way that we turn the other cheek, defeat those who are in front of us, not by killing them, but by, finding unity with them in a way that is, I mean, that's the kingdom to me. We can walk into a conversation with two different ideas, and the only way you're going to change anybody's mind, and especially online, you're never going to out-argue somebody online. The best way to do is develop a relationship, and the best way to develop a relationship is by not questioning their salvation.
okay, well, can I ask you this? And again, it's not that I disagree with you, but when someone questions my salvation,
Mm-hmm.
I don't get offended. Even
Yeah.
even if they're questioning it, they have no basis to question it. They're totally wrong. They're coming from left field, because that's what atheists do anyways. So I certainly don't get offended when atheists do it. I'm not going to get offended when a fellow believer does it. So, and that's
Yeah.
just me. That's just
Yeah,
me.
that is
And I'm not
just you.
perfect at it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect at it. I still have my moments, but one of the things that I have tried to learn is not have the spirit of offense, if you will. That's not to say that I
Right.
don't ever get offended, but people question my salvation all the time.
Yeah,
And if they see
it sounds like your perfect rhetorical sparring partner would be yourself. It seems like you wouldn't
absolutely,
you would have the
you have to.
understanding, and it takes a lot. I'll tell you what, from my own experience, what you're saying takes a lot. I don't know what a lot of what. It takes a lot of experience, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of beatings, it takes a lot of confidence, it takes a lot of these things. Coming from somebody who has taken a lot of hate over a lot of years, and thankfully I can say that I agree with you, and I like to think myself a little bit more thick-skinned like that. However, that's a very rare thing. You just have to know, if you want to be effective in changing people's minds, you just have to know that people are going to get offended at that. And, this is one of I'll tell you this too. This is one of the biggest downfalls of being someone who is smart. When you are a smart person, you overestimate other people's ability to to take a beating. It's the thing. And you underestimate their ability to check out very quickly, because smart people can engage, they can stay engaged, and they can jump around the jungle gym that is, a rhetorical sparring match. But you got to know, you can do that for sports. I'm sure I get the sense that you like doing this sort of thing. You take pleasure from it in sort of a sporting way, which is great, because obviously I kind of do as well. But other people, they do not like it. They do not do it for sport. Getting into a rhetorical match like this is survival, especially people who grew up in sort of loud, anxious, angry homes, people who have come out of loud, angry, anxious, faith backgrounds. For you and I, we can go back and forth and do our best to interrupt each other, not interrupt each other, and hit each other's points and go back and forth and this kind of thing. Most people, I won't even say 99, 90% of people in a conversation like this get instantly triggered, instantly shut down, instantly go into defensive mode. And that's just a reality that we got to work with, So I'm saying this
I
as
agree with
someone
that.
who has now enjoyed several matches with you. Yeah, the
Well, I
reason I
agree
call
with
you
you.
out on that is because I have listeners. There are people listening, and they need to know that there's someone who understands how they're experiencing what you're saying.
No, I agree with you, and I'll land my plane with this. I agree that most people would get offended, but to me, that's also not a reason to not have the conversation. Now, again, I'm not married. I don't have children, so I can't use, having the difficult conversation with a loved one scenario. But, unless, it's a brother or sister or something, I could. But be that as it may, and again, I agree with what you're saying. But the fact that the risk of somebody is going to get offensive, shut down, I just, me personally, just still don't believe that's a reason to not necessarily have it.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not saying not have it.
that's just.
I'm not saying not have it.
I
I'm
mean,
saying
yeah.
have it in a way that actually profits you. Because think of it selfishly. Selfishly, you should want somebody to stick around in your conversation long enough that you can change their mind or get your point across. So I'm not even saying for them, you're not babying anybody. For your own strategy for victory, for your own strategy for communication, for your own winnings that are waiting for you on the sort of rhetorical battlefield. I'm not saying baby people because I don't want them to cry. I'm saying treat people how they want to be treated, and you'll have a much easier time communicating your point in a way that doesn't have them shut down. That's it. So thank you very much for calling in.
Thank you, brother.
Again,
Thank you, brother.
Thanks for calling in, and I'll talk to you next time. And you take it easy, buddy.
Thank you, brother. You too.
You bet. Bye. All right. See, there we go. See, the timer is its own thing. I hope that at the very least, conversations like that, help give people a little bit of perspective on not just what people are talking about, but how they're talking about it, and that sort of thing. So hopefully that didn't get on too many people's nerves there. But thank you very much, Esteban. Always a pleasure talking to you. Okay, goodness gracious. Let me see where we're at. We're at an hour and 35 minutes. Okay, we can take a couple more calls. I will. Oh, the person who was next in line disappeared. Okay, well, we have another person that we will jump on here. Let me reset my little timer. Gonna talk to Trash Man. Trash Man, you are up on stage. What's going on, buddy?
Good afternoon. I'm just in the yard playing with the daughter.
Hey, what a wonderful Thursday.
Oh, yeah. It's about 80 degrees, the coolest summer I have seen in decades.
Really?
Oh, my goodness. Usually it's over 115 by now, and it has been for a month or two.
Oh, goodness gracious, man. Yeah, I guess I hadn't really noticed. It's still pretty hot around me, but for those who've been listening to the show since 2021 or so, when I first moved out here, people will remember doing the show in the summer. I had to wear an ice vest, a vest that I froze in the freezer, and wear it during the show because I would get way too hot. And look at me now, no ice vest. I can't tell if it's just cooler or if I'm getting more hardy out here on the range, but do you like it a little bit cooler? Is that nicer for you?
Oh, for me. Oh, yeah. Here in
Okay,
central
good.
Oklahoma, it is wonderful. But
Good.
I believe we're in for a long, hard winter.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You mean that
Light summer,
literally?
hard winter.
Oh, I see. Well, all right. I mean, I was gonna say long hard winter also sounds like a Biden wording, about COVID or something. But if it just snows a little more than usual, I think I'll be able to make it.
In my area, I'm thinking ice storms. I got to get my chainsaw ready now while I can. But
Yeah.
in so Lincoln, the first caller was, oh, there's some cheaper ways. Right on,
Okay.
but there are some cheaper ways. I am all about using trash for everything. I do not buy anything new.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I developed a self-draining, self-filling hydroponic system requiring no electricity.
Okay. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
So you have these tubs, and I filled them with these clay balls, kind of like slingshot ammo, but it's made for hydroponic. And I'm gonna put the blueprints up on the community. I thank you for turning me on to the community. I don't do
Oh,
any
you bet.
social media, and that place is great. But you have a little tube, like a PVC tube, and then a cap on top of it. And whenever it fills to a certain point, it will siphon itself out. And you do that once or twice a day with a 5-gallon bucket, and you get the water to the roots like you need. You put in the nutrients. I just put in, manure and stuff like that. Not so much where it'll burn it. But then I developed, you take like a gallon milk jug or something with a preferably stronger plastic, and in that cap you drill 2 little holes, and then in one side you put a small tube, and the other side a long tube that goes all the way to the top. You fill that jug full of water and put the cap on, and in the long tube you put that to your water source, and in the short end tube you put that to what you want to feed, and it will create enough suction in that tank basically to siphon itself and create a a non-electric pump, essentially.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's very interesting, man. You're crafty out there in Oklahoma.
Well, we had the Dust Bowl, we had all the rejects. You learn to use what you got and make it work.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a very important skill. It's going to be. I mean, it is already a very important skill, but the crafty will inherit the earth, I think.
The meek, yes. Meek does not mean weak. Meek means I am lowly, I am strong at the same time.
There you go, man. There you go. Got to yeah, start some sort of let's see here. Meek machines. Meek machines some sort of club here. The Meek Machines.
And Esteban started with a good point. Did you know if any wholesaler, food wholesaler, will sell to anybody as long as there's a big enough order? So if you and 5 of your neighbors say, hey, let's get together, you can order from the same company at the same price that the local grocery store orders from. And you just split it all up, and or you just basically make your own co-op or grocery store
I
at
mean,
a much
it
price.
seems like the way it should be. It's a great way to cut out. I mean, it's somebody's going to have to take some time out of their day to do it. But heck, we're not going to have much else to do anyways coming up here soon.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you take the pride out, you feed yourself and one other person or one other family if you can. And if everybody does that, just like the Victory Gardens of World War II, you're all covered. You don't have to worry about the system falling because you have your own system. You have God's system, the system that He created, which is value for value. I value what you're doing, and you value what I'm doing, and we trade off of each other.
Amen. It's like the parable of uh, the rabbit hole people I told at the beginning of the show. I don't know if you got it or not, but see, that's the
I,
thing.
I missed
Pe-
that.
People
I
will
was taking.
find a way. Don't worry. Don't go back and listen to it. It wasn't very good. Just move forward with the assumption that it was a very wise and yeah, intricate yet simple illusion to how humanity organizes itself in that way.
That's the way it works. I love the way your brain works. By the way, the people come at you all sorts of ways, and I mean, you got it covered, and in a good way.
Well, thank you very much, man. You know, it's fun. It's nice. I mean, there's a lot of things about the internet that I would change if I could, but one good thing, the small, simple promise of the internet is that you can find some people who got funky brains like your own. So I'm glad we can all come together around this.
And you did when I first tuned in. You said something that struck me: Cain and Abel.
Hmm.
What if so? Cain, his offering was not accepted, and Abel, he was giving blood and doing what was accepted. And Cain, just out of what you know, pick your reason, said, "You know what? If you want blood, I'll give you blood. Here's my brother's blood,"
Yeah,
and
right.
started the human sacrifice. And that just kind of struck me there.
No, that I mean that's a great. You know what's so funny? This show's fun because I get to kind of deploy some of the weird things that I had just been thinking about on my own time. And I had, again, it always happens. I'd been thinking about Kane, and in my brain, I'd been calling it Kane Tech. I just like see like a logo like Kane Tech. It'd be a cool, technocracy company or something. And it really was this descendant Cain's descendants were, I would say, more materially responsible for what life is like now. Who knows what have happened if, the humanity had gone the way of Abel, meaning, making sacrifices that were appropriate. And, the Cain tech descendant Nephilim thing, I think you're right, goes back to what you said, which is you want blood? Here's blood. God.
Yeah.
You didn't like my sacrifice. You liked Cain's blood sacrifice. Well, here's I'm sorry, Abel's blood sacrifice. Then here's Abel's blood sacrifice. Take it. And that sort of spirit, that very human spirit of like, it's not just revenge, it's not just anger. It's there's an aspect of like taking the cosmic order into his own hands. Cain was taking the cosmic order into his own hands, and that includes, moving into the technological sort of domination of creation. It's very trippy how connected it all is.
Well, that even mimics Jesus on the cross and Satan.
Yeah,
You want blood? Okay, here's the perfect blood. Here you go. How do you
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
It's cynical and it's dark, but
No,
because we are all descendants of it, it's kind of runs in our blood, so we have to fight it.
I think you're
And Jesus
totally
taught us.
right. Sorry, continue. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're good. You didn't really interrupt. Uh,
Yeah, no, I think
Jesus
it's a
taught
really
us
great
how to
point because I had heard it said this way. And look, I don't know. I'm sure there's theological ways you could kind of dispute this point, but I heard it put this way once, and I thought it was very powerful. And the question is like, well, why did Jesus have to spill his blood? Why did God require the death of Jesus? Why couldn't he just have, forgiven us without spilling of the blood? And look, I'm not dying on any theological hills here, but one perspective that made me pause and think was, no. Jesus didn't need to die because God required blood. Jesus needed to die because we require blood. It's
Oh,
something about us is if there's no blood, we're not listening. If no blood's being spilled, it doesn't, it's just what are the consequences? It's just a passing event. And there's something about the sort of like fallen nature of man that requires blood to be spilled before we start listening, before we really pay attention, or before we take something seriously. And so yeah, go ahead.
as a kid, it's like a spanking. As a kid growing up, some kids, I was not one of them. You could tell them how they should act, how they should what they should do, and they'll listen. And if you said, "I'm disappointed in you," they took it really hard. I was
Mm.
not one of them. I required the spanking. Did not have the rod. I did not listen.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and how much worse is it too in that situation? This is a now I don't know, you seem to be a special character, so I won't assume you are the same way, but it's another sort of common parenting practice or even just control mechanism where, you do something wrong, but somebody else gets the spanking. There's another certain sort of consequential depth to that as well. You were the one who broke the rules, but somebody else suffers for that. Now you are sort of bearing the weight of that for your brother.
Well, that's what the mainstream media does to us all the time.
Mm,
These people are doing this, so you must have to suffer for that.
yeah,
You're the reason. Well,
right,
no, I wasn't the reason. They were the reason. What are you talking about?
right, right. Yeah, this is kind of like a certain medical product from a few years ago too. You're making everyone else suffer because you didn't do the thing. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, man. And, I'm not going to make it any sort of hard theology or anything, but it really, made a lot of sense to me, or at least gave me a perspective that I thought was pretty powerful, which is like, yeah, God can do whatever he wants. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He doesn't require anything. He makes requirements of his creation, but he has everything he needs. He doesn't need blood. Blood is a part of the equation because we need blood to be a part of the equation, which I think is in line with the fact that, it was our sins being forgiven.
Right.
It was,
He
yeah,
wants us to think. He wants us to be forgiving. He wants us to love.
yeah. Amen, man.
Period.
Well, Trash Man, it's great talking to you, man. Was there anything else you wanted to leave us with?
One last thing.
Okay.
Go low tech. Get
Yes.
low tech. Grind your coffee by hand, your cage rattler coffee. I use a percolator. Uh, go low tech with something that you can use without ex not extraterrestrial, not extramarital, extra something you can do it on your own
Yeah.
without just go low tech.
Yeah. I like it. Go low tech. There's a lot less things can break, a lot less resources will need to be wasted, talking about electricity, things like that. And the people who go low tech, the meek machines, they're going to be in a pretty good spot here when things go sideways. Thanks for calling in, Trash Man. It's always great talking to you, buddy.
Always great talking, always great listening. Peace
God
and love.
bless. There you go. Always great to hear from Trash Man. Yeah, I remember back in Basil Bunker days, he had all sorts of great tips and tricks, calling in, teaching people how to make things work without all the fancy tech. Cane tech, baby. Got to get away from the cane tech. Got to get back to God's tech. Hand crank coffee grinders. One of his recommendations was a hand a water pump, a hand water pump, which I think about all the time. Actually, I think about especially yesterday when the power went out and things went on the fritz. The water's out. It's an electric motor that pumps my water, and I'm sitting there thinking, if only I had listened to Trash Man and got myself a hand crank water pump, which would not be hard for me to do. It's totally something. At this point, I do feel comfortable in my ability to install one of those into the well. So I might have to do that. I did look it up. Believe it or not, I looked up a hand pump, water pump, and I just had never thought about it before. Any time I've ever seen a hand water pump, it's been on some antique or at an antique store or sticking out of the ground in some abandoned field, or I don't know, maybe saw one on display at Silver Dollar City or something. But believe it or not, they keep making them. They exist. You can get brand new ones. They're beautiful. I did find one that was like $600 though. If you're gonna go shopping, you gotta go shopping. You gotta find the good stuff. You gotta compare. Okay, this one's $600 versus this one's just like $100, $200. It's a lot of metal. You wouldn't think it, but there's a lot of it's a big solid thing of metal basically. So you're just buying a couple $100 worth of steel. Anyways, there's the chronicles of trying to buy a hand crank water pump. And with that, folks, I will say it'd be a little bit hard to podcast mechanically, podcast by hand. I guess that's just called talking. There has to be I guess it's just going out on the street and yelling at people. That's what podcasting is, or just yelling whether there's people or not people. Sometimes you go out and you start talking about the government and nobody listens. They're just walking. Sometimes you can get a crowd together, and that's just podcasting, baby. That's just podcasting, baby. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. Again, big old shout out to everybody who's on the Canary Cry text message alert system. If you haven't yet, do it now. Even you podcast listeners, the non-live listeners, take out your phone, open the messaging app, and text the word canary to 877-740-5050. 877-740-3226. Data rates may apply. I don't know if data rates apply. I'm assuming text message rates will apply. Okay, this is Feeding the Ducks. It's the most revered and beloved royalty-free stock music that comes with the streaming software, and it's changing lives. We do have a meetup. Go to canarycrymeetups.com. Garland, Texas, on August 30th. Be there, be square. canarycrymeetups.com. You can email truthtransistorradio@gmail.com to get the info. Show up there. Thanks for everybody who came in, hung out with me live. Big ol' shout out to all the callers. And that's it, folks. Make sure to tune in next time to Canary Cry Clubhouse. But until then, think outside the cage.